So there are all these contradictions, but contradictions are part of life. We cannot change the past. We cannot change what has happened on this land, right? But books like Black and Female are important because they provide us, as you said, a framework to really look at the history.
We're back with another exciting episode this week thanks to Akello Digital Library. They're the sponsors for our season because they understand the importance of stories and having conversations that go beyond the pages. I'm excited to talk to this week's guest, Tonderai Mudambo. She's one half of the founders of the Harare Book Club, and of course, she's a book lover. So we'll be unpacking which book she chose and why, and go on a journey with her. Make sure you tune in. A warm welcome to you, Tondi. I am so excited to talk to you. I love a book lover, and I feel like you are the ultimate book lover because you even started a book club with your partner Rumbi Zinyemba, and it's the Harare Book Club. And today we're talking about books, of course, here on the Tando Channel Book Club. So I'm excited to delve into your pick for today. It's by the award-winning playwright, author, filmmaker Tsitsi Dangarembga, and it's called Black and Female. And no coincidence, we're both Black and female. So straight away, why did you pick this book aside from the obviousness of the title?
Okay, well, firstly, thank you, Tendai, for the warm introduction, and hi to all your viewers. I really appreciate the invitation today to come and share a book that I love and that I think is important that more Zimbabweans and people in general should be aware of and reading. I picked this book because we're currently in International Women's Month, and I'm always thinking about my own humanity and my own position in the world. Tsitsi Dangarembga is also our most famous author, very impactful. And it being Women's Month, I'm specifically thinking about where women are in society right now and what we can do to perhaps move forward, and some of the forces that are explored in this collection of essays where Dangarembga delves deeply into Zimbabwe's history, its independence era and post-independence, and also present day. So I thought that would contextualize our conversation and give us a lot of interesting discussion points.
I think so. I like the way you said just now, you're always thinking about your own humanity and your place in the world. Why is that something that comes up often for you?
Well, I'm not sure. Well, Dangarembga starts off the book by saying she was an existential refugee. I'm not sure if I'm having an existential crisis.
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
But I certainly am, as I've said, just thinking about who I am, where I am, and where I would like to be going forward. So just my career, my passion projects, such as my literary organization. I also do small-scale farming. I'm a daughter. I'm a friend. So thinking about myself within the professional context, my private context in terms of my family and everything else. And the theme for Women's Month in 2025 is Accelerate Action. So always thinking about how to pull all these different themes together.
Okay, so I mean, I do like what I know about you so far. I know you have a passion for sustainable development as well, and economic development. So that already tells me that you're someone who's ambitious. I think you probably think on a very big scale about the kind of impact that you, yes, and macro is like, I think that's your theme. I think that's a word that resonates with you. So how does that come across? I mean, is that something that sort of comes across to you through this book in particular? I know, I feel like Tsitsi's books and her work speaks to you in general, but I mean, in this book in particular.
Well, just off the bat, we do have a very good relationship with Tsitsi in terms of the work that I've done in the with our book club. And she's been a supporter of ours. We've hosted her on our platform before. So I admire her in that sense. She also is someone who's Manyika. My family comes from Manyika land too.
Oh, okay.
She is someone who spent significant time in the UK. So did I. So when I read Nervous Conditions, I related a lot to, it was a bit scary
Okay.
reading it because I could relate to it a lot. Also, my father and my mother also, at the time when I was younger, when they got married, they were both pursuing further studies in the UK. So I can relate a lot to her biography.
Okay, all right. So we've got lots of themes. It's a very serious academic kind of book, which is different. And I know you pointed out that her moving into the nonfiction space is also something that appealed to you. But just tell me a little bit about how she delves into history, Zimbabwean history in particular, and maybe the kind of impression that that had on you afterwards.
Sure. So, yes, you're right, Tendai, that it is an academic book, but I do also want to stress that while it is academic in its themes in terms of history, her analysis of socio-economic trends, it is also quite personal. So it was an inroad to understand, because when we look at public figures, quite often
Yeah.
there's this amazing person who's done all of these things, but we don't quite often get a look behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And she does this through quite an interesting tactic of presenting her life juxtaposed towards the story of Zimbabwe, and how those two tales are running in parallel, and how what was going on in the wider context is affecting her own family, her work, and her progress as a writer in her own career. So
Yeah.
I think whilst it is academic, I found it approachable in that sense because it's quite personalized. Quite often when we read books, especially when they relate to history, if you think about, let's say if you were going to read about the, I don't know, the Shaka Zulu's war, for example, right?
Okay.
It's always, their dates, their places, and that can feel quite alienating to readers. So this is why I picked this book and why I think this book is great. Also, historical fiction is my favorite genre
Okay.
of all time. So
You've actually
yeah.
preempted. I was going to ask you. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, I can see why this comes alive for you. And that was my next, it's a perfect segue because I also noticed, like, when she talks about history and she talks about herself or her mother, I think it just makes it real and tangible. And it's something that I could relate to directly because immediately I'll start thinking about my mother and my grandmother and sort of what they went through as women, in Rhodesia and then also in Zimbabwe. So I wanted to understand from you, like, did that make you go and ask your mom more questions? Did you want to talk to aunties, grandmothers, whatever, and sort of get a deeper sense from your family's perspective? Or did you already know the stories?
I know the stories quite well. Unfortunately, both of my grandmothers are late. But if I think about the relationship that I have with my mother or my mother's sisters, which is quite, we have a close relationship,
Lovely.
but also an open relationship because I was raised in an environment, for example, my mother and all of her sisters, they at least have undergraduate level. Some have even masters. So education was always a very important theme
Yeah.
for my grandparents on the Rukweza side. All four of my grandparents were teachers.
Like
Yes.
my grandmother.
Yes, so education and
Yeah.
women's advancement is something that wasn't necessarily, we say these things as if they're themes. No, it was something that was quite tangible,
Yeah.
that was being practiced in my family before I was born.
Yeah.
So what Tsitsi Dangarembga talks about and the position of women, I see it not just as something that is abstract. It's quite tangible. So whenever we read, as you said, I believe as readers, we should be conscious of how whatever a writer is presenting to us thematically, how can we look at our own lives and see how it may apply, how we can do better. And that's one of the real power that I believe that reading can have.
I definitely agree with you. And this season, our theme is Beyond the Pages, because we're just really passionate about the fact that it's not just something you pick up, whether it's on your tablet or actually physically. I was going to say 3D, I don't know why. But it's something that can stay with you and impact your life and go on a journey with you. I'm one of those people who think that books are like people. So I feel like books come into your life when they're supposed to, and then you connect with it, you take away what you need to, and then you say goodbye. But some really good books, I don't actually get to the end.
Why not?
Because I don't want to say goodbye to the characters. They become
Seriously?
very real to me.
Okay, so don't you feel, I don't know, you're the first person that ever said that, so don't
Really?
you, aren't you curious about the ending or?
I'll just make peace with the fact that I just don't want to know. I can't say goodbye. I don't want to know that this one never got married or she never concluded this, or I'm just like, no, I'm just going to leave it here and just imagine what I want to imagine. Yeah, I get very attached. Yeah, okay. So let's talk a little bit about one of the heavier themes, which is obviously race. I think this has been a big theme, obviously in Africa, many places of the world, but obviously in Zimbabwe. And I think the way that she discusses it and unpacks it is interesting, because I think, like we're talking before, obviously being, a past colony, that sort of colonial hangover is something that we always grapple with moving forward, and sort of finding ways to create identities, move out of it, see how it's affected us, and things like that. So I just wanted to know, what were your thoughts around that, in terms of, we are Black and female, but how do you feel that that is today as a modern Zimbabwean woman with all this education, with these ambitions? How is it feeling like for you?
That's a great question. So
A bit long-winded, but yeah, you got
fine.
it.
Yeah, I've got it. It was all right. Well, when the first part of your question was to do with empire, what Tsitsi Dangarembga calls empire,
Yeah.
right? And specifically when we think about what was formerly Southern Rhodesia, what became Zimbabwe, for perhaps some of the watchers who don't know, it is what it used to be what we call the settler colony. So there's different types of, when we say colonization,
There's
some
different
people just
types.
think it was the same.
Yeah.
So it's settler colony similar to South Africa. So that then brings the issue of race into lived reality.
Yeah.
And there's the conceptualization of what is Black. But for example, she talks about authors like Ama Ata Aidu from Ghana, who actually lived in Zimbabwe for a time in the 80s. And so for someone who comes from Ghana, the concept of being Black because your entire country is of Africans, it's not really the same as someone's conceptualization if you're Zimbabwean, where your society is multiracial, but it is in Africa. And unfortunately, during the colonial period, as we know, it's not just about colonizing the land or the body. What's most important, perhaps more than everything, is colonization of the mind.
Exactly.
How much can the system be used to create a portrait of an African as a Black person, not as, so we homogenize it, right? So you're no longer a Manika person, you're no longer a Muzezuru, you're Black. And then from there, Black is negative. So if it's your traditional spiritualism, then we call it witchcraft.
Yeah.
Right? Then if you want access to education, you have to be baptized in either the Catholic, Anglican, etc. church. And when you, perhaps sometimes when you go to a certain school, you cannot speak in your mother tongue. It has to be English. And so that creates the Black aspect, right? And it's quite negative. We then become independent countries, but as you've said, there's still that colonial hangover. Then onto the second part of your question, when you were talking about how does this affect you? So we have all of these different forces, if you want to call them. So we've got the before colonization and imperialism. What would we have been? How did imperialism affect our own conceptualization and our own practices of our culture, how we perceived ourselves? And then now we're independent. We now kind of we've homogenized, where we've taken bits and pieces from everything. But many of these themes are quite contradictory. At the same time, we know that education is a very powerful tool that we need in order for our countries to develop, right, economically. But if a woman gets too educated, how will you be able to get married?
Yeah.
If you have a master's degree, will you find a husband? You women who work, you think you're too special. So it's showing that we've not yet got to the so-called promised land.
Yeah.
And also, if a woman is too educated, sometimes people say, oh, you're not black anymore. You're trying to be white. But why does my education or professional advancement, why does it have to be viewed as me or any other woman trying to become westernized or white? Why is that? But we never really interrogate
The whys, yeah.
the whys, or how can't we just be a bit revolutionary in our thinking and remove the why and say, okay, how can we find a way of compromising? Or can we not develop culture, cultural practices, our belief system? It's not something that's static.
No, it's
It's
not.
dynamic. So why do we have to be so rigid?
And I think it's interesting because that naturally assumes that, so if you're saying that a Black woman trying to be too educated is white, so then the opposite then must seem to be true, that the lack of education is what a Black woman really, which doesn't make any sense because of the complexities, of our culture.
And it brings us back to the
Yes.
stereotype that the African was a barbarian, essentially.
Exactly.
And sometimes we are reaffirming that stance without a sense of irony at all.
I think it's a very difficult place, I think, for us Africans to be in, where you're grappling with this level of violent historical impact, right, through colonialism, and then trying to craft an identity while it's happening. You're living it, and you've got to hold on to something, right? So if your parents are pastors or you grew up in the church, or that's a very fundamental part of your identity and character. And to hear someone say, oh, this came with the colonialists and we used to do it's something you can't really connect with. What is that person supposed to do? Throw away everything that they know? And I think it's a scary place, but it's a good place to always question these different things. But I think it's very challenging, and it's just one of those worthwhile endeavors that we have to keep moving along on and exploring. But I think it's an incredibly powerful and important topic, and I think the way that she tries to unpack it, it's one of those important voices that we need, because she can only do it in her specific kind of way.
Yes, you're quite right. So there are all these contradictions, but contradictions are part of life. We cannot change the past. We cannot change what has happened on this land, right? But books like Black and Female are important because they provide us, as you said, a framework to really look at the history. And I also want to stress, when we talk about history, who has written the history?
Okay,
again,
that's
in the past, right?
Yeah.
If it was scholars who are Black or African, they weren't women for the most part.
Right.
So that also affects how someone goes into the historical archive and looks at whatever documentation it is. It's shaped by your worldview, right? So she provides a framework that interrogates all of these things and questions it, and hearing it from the female voice, or voice that posits itself as being progressive and also, most importantly, feminist, a Black feminist voice. That is the beauty of this essay collection.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I love the fact that you actually got to sit down with her and probably, were you able to discuss this book, or was it her previous book?
She joined our book club. This was just before the world turned upside down. This was January 2020. And we discussed her previous works, So Nervous Conditions, The Book of Naught, This Mournable Body, and some of her plays. And yeah, she's brilliant. I can't say more than that.
I can literally see the admiration on your face, and I think that's I wouldn't disagree with you at all on that topic.
She also runs the Zimbabwe International Women's Film Festival, so that's also an interesting dimension to the work that she does, promoting film and again, we don't have a lot of books written, right? Because our histories are oral.
Yeah.
So writing things down is important, but also the audiovisual format is just as important too. So all of these things are integral to us, again, reimagining what we can be like in terms of putting ourselves into the history and creating an archive where our voices are asserting themselves.
All right. Okay. So, well, I think that links nicely into the next segment of the interview. I'm just going to throw a few questions at you and we'll see what you say and go from there. So, we'll be right back. Okay, so this is one of the parts I really love during the show, and this is our just rapid fire questions, but they're not too hectic, I promise. So the first one is, what was the first book you remember reading?
There's this book, it's a collection of little, it's a picture book with garden fairies. I've forgotten the writer, but yeah, that's the first book I can remember.
How old were you?
I don't know. Maybe I was 4.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I was 4.
All right. And your favorite genre? I think you mentioned it before.
Historical fiction.
Okay. Which fictional character would you be best friends with?
Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and
Really?
Prejudice. Yes, that's technically my favorite book.
Okay. All right. Okay. Which author would write your biography?
It's a good one. So I'm going to pick a Zimbabwean writer. I'll pick Siphiwe Gloria Ndlovu.
Okay.
She's a writer from Bulawayo. She wrote the Theory of Flight, The History of Man. And guess what genre she writes?
Historical fiction.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'll pick her. Okay,
I'm just going to segue a little bit. So you'd want her to frame your book like historical fiction. I mean, it would be a biography, yes, but I mean...
What I like about Siphiwe is she does multi-generational books. So then if she was going to write my biography, she would then write about, like, what she does is she goes back different generations and goes forward. So I would like for her to talk about my parents, talk about my great-great-grandparents, my uncles, aunts,
everything that made you come into being.
My friends, yes. So that's why I picked her.
Oh, great. Okay. Which book would you love to see adapted into a film, which isn't, to the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge. There's a book I read last year. It's from Trinidad and Tobago. It's called Hungry Ghosts by an author called Kevin Jared Hossein.
Okay.
And I didn't know this, and this is why, again, a historical fiction book.
Yeah.
I didn't really know about the Indian community that's in Trinidad and Tobago. So and some of the poverty that they experienced because they were they emigrated from India to Trinidad as indentured servants. So they were like very oppressed whilst living in Trinidad, and he looks at a family and a collection of people who are living in what is essentially a slum.
Yeah.
There on a former plantation. I think that would be an excellent movie.
Okay. If you had to sit down with 3 authors, just having a dinner, but not Tsitsi Dangarembga. She can't be part of it.
She can't be? Okay. Off the bat, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Straight.
Classic.
That's easy. Do they have to be alive?
No.
Chinua Achebe. Okay, that's 2 Nigerians. So Yvonne Vera.
Okay. All right. I like it. That's a good combination. And you throw in a gentleman, which is nice. Okay. All right. So now I want you to share a quote with us. Something that's meaningful to you from the book Black and Female. And then we'll just go into why you chose that quote.
Sure. So I picked... Oh, sorry. So this is in the introduction. It's the first stanza of the book.
Yeah.
I am an existential refugee. I have been in flight since I left the womb, and probably before. Given the circumstances I was born into and the effect of these circumstances on my prenatal environment.
Okay.
Sets the tone.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. Okay, we're in for, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why did you go with that one?
Well, as I've said, it sets the tone, lets you know that this is a bit of a serious read.
Yep.
But at the same time, it let me know from the beginning, because I wasn't sure what to expect. Again, when you approach essay collections, perhaps you think, as you said before, it's quite academic, but it let me know that she's taking a step back from herself and looking at her life from a panoramic view. And I thought that was such a great approach to look at these quite heavy themes. It humanizes it, it personalizes it, it makes some of the heavier blows, because reading about things like colonial violence, etc., it's not the easiest, subjects to broach. But in so doing, it makes it a bit tender, and it also forces the reader to think about, well, I'm who I am today, but how much of who I am is shaped by what was going on in, with my parents. What made my parents my parents?
Yeah.
And then she introduces us this way, and then she talks about her parents, she talks about Rhodesia, and then she leads us into the different essays.
Okay. All right. What can you tell me about how, okay, let me rewind. You talked about how the way she wrote sort of it's like she puts a distance between herself and these very big themes, I guess to observe better, if I understood how you described it, or did I misunderstand?
No. I think when she needs to take a panoramic view, she does.
Yeah.
But there's always personal antidotes that she puts in there to let you know, like, for example, she talks about the Legal Age of Majority Act, which was passed into law in 1982.
Yeah.
She does that, so that's a fact, right? It's a legal factoid. But then she is still reminding you, okay, well, if Black women only gained legal majority in 1982, what did that really mean about my position, my mother's position, my grandmother's position in the society prior to 1982? What were the laws like during the Rhodesian period? And how did that affect, again, the positions that women could occupy? So specifically with Tsitsi Dangarembga, and all of our Zimbabwean watchers should know that her mother, Susan, was the first Black woman in Rhodesia to obtain a university undergraduate degree. But even despite that, she still wasn't considered to be a legal adult. She was a perpetual minor until 1982.
Yeah.
That's a huge contradiction.
Yeah.
So she gives us the facts, she unpacks it, she gives you personal antidotes. You can get to, as a reader, if you are sensitive enough, to bring those themes all together. That's the beauty of this book.
And just as we're talking about that, I just started to wonder, because I mean, you're a corporate lawyer, and so obviously you have a legal background. And I'm wondering, as you're reading this information, I don't know, how did that strike you? You're in the legal space, you're a woman, and then there's this moment that she's talking about, which is quite pivotal in our history.
Well, and perhaps it's also, as you mentioned, because my legal background, yes, of course, I try to be as sensitive as possible, but when I'm approaching things like work, I have that demarcation sort of. So you have to understand that the law is, again, it's something that's dynamic and it changes according to whatever social forces are there.
Yeah.
So that shapes even in terms of judgments and how the jurisprudence moves through time.
Yeah.
And as we know with any legal act, yes, it's there, but how do we interpret it? And it's something that's set in stone, but doesn't mean that it can't be repealed as we start to gain, I guess, perhaps trends change, etc. So for me, again, it's interesting. These are some things that I was aware of.
Yeah.
So to me, it didn't upset me or anything like that. It was a fact.
I go straight to feelings.
To feelings.
I'm just outraged, and then I'm like, okay.
Yeah. But anger is useful, right? Anger is useful, but it's how we take the anger or being disgruntled. How can I use my anger to something that is, to what end?
Yeah.
I always ask myself. If we're saying that there is some form of, let's say if it's the Marriage Act, which was recently changed, it was changed to also reflect that, yes, we have the Roman Dutch law, we have a church wedding, but also how can that fit together with the concept of traditional marriages? We shouldn't be trying to look at the traditional marriage as something that is less than, you know, a Roman Dutch church wedding, for example.
Okay. All right. Okay, tell me a little bit about how, if in any way, anything from the essays do you feel is going to impact how you work?
So when you mean work...
So not like in your private life, but I mean actual, like day-to-day your work in the legal space,
I first read this book it came out at the end of 2023. So I read this book in the beginning of 2024, which is just over a year ago.
Yeah, quite recent.
And when I think of how it's impacted how I work, I'm perhaps quite a pensive person. If anyone who knows me will tell you I'm always thinking perhaps a little bit too much. And I'm quite insular in that way. So I always try to think about, one, the bigger picture, but also the future.
Yeah.
And how I can reimagine the things I don't like.
Yeah.
So I look at society and there are many things that I don't like. And so that was perhaps when I was younger. So I don't like this thing. All right, this is who I am. These are the skills that I have. These are the assets that I have at my disposal. This is my network. This is my support system.
Right.
These are the cards that I have on my deck. If I don't like X problem, what can I do in my capacity to fix this problem?
Yeah.
And that's something that I believe I've always tried to do, but I'm getting better at it.
Yeah.
So when when Dangarembga is talking about issues to do with being marginalized in the writing industry, right? Not getting, despite being such a celebrated author, and then not getting invited to certain literary events 10 years after Nervous Condition came out, which was completely shocking to me. But then when I took a step back, is it really that shocking? Because when it comes to women in the workplace, in whichever industry or sector in our country, we're still repressed. We still have not gotten to a place where we are comfortable with a woman being as educated or more educated than a man. Worse off if you're young.
Yeah.
Worse off if you're not married. Worse off if you don't have children. But again, we understand that perhaps before this was the role that we put into women.
Yeah.
But okay, why can't we say some women are allowed to just make whatever decision they want to make? And also, how can we say to an adult who's supposed to be independent, who has rights under the law, etc., who are we to say, oh, you should be allowed to do this or not? And even for women who are married and do have children, we see that perhaps they're not allowed to be, again, more ambitious whilst having children, whilst having a family. Men have families, men get married. Nobody ever feels that, oh, because you're now a husband, you shouldn't be ambitious. No, in fact, we tell them you have to earn more money and you can only earn more money by being ambitious, right?
And we've structured it so that everything else must facilitate that goal.
Right, but still we have somewhat what I would say are backwards values when it comes to who takes care of children, who does the domestic work. And if we say we gender the domestic sphere to women and say, oh, men are not supposed to change a child's nappies. Those are still conversations we're having in 2025 in this country, right? But he's a parent. Why is this supposed to be something that's up for debate just take care of your child. But unfortunately, we're still there. So those are some of the ways that I have incorporated her musings,
Oh, what
her
do you mean? So like
investigation.
I don't know, with your couple friends, you make sure that the husband changes what do you mean
No,
by?
well, no, I don't get involved in people's marriages. I'm not married. Just so
Okay.
yeah, that one I don't touch. But in terms of perhaps where I'm living, it's definitely it's fine. And for me to say, and perhaps it already wasn't so much of an issue in my family, but it's perfectly fine to say, sorry, I'm not coming to do whatever. I'm not going wherever to some family function because I have to go. I've got this
Okay.
prior engagement at work, or if I am coming, I have to come a bit late. And everyone has to understand that, because sometimes you go to the family function and what do we normally see? All the women are running about cleaning and cooking, and what are the men doing?
They're strategizing.
Ah. So, and again, I don't want to say that if a woman also wants to help,
Yeah.
and she wants to, clean and cook and things like that, because we do understand also that that's an expression of love.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine, but how we need to stress the freedom of choice.
Yeah.
The freedom part is really what I'm concerned with. Yeah.
Okay, I can see that. All right. So I feel like in a way, as much as, okay, the books are an expression, right, of the author. And so I feel like that gives us maybe a gateway into the person, right? And it's always interesting to me in the different books that they have. What sometimes I feel like I glean little parts of them. Do you feel like, for example, Tsitsi is, I don't know, someone that you connect with, or a mirror to you, or just from reading her, you just thought, this person gets me?
Yes, in a way, but also I would like to emphasize that that can be quite dangerous if you're reading an author, because then there's the confirmational bias
Okay.
danger of feeling that you're reading into what you think someone else's worldview is. And then perhaps if they say something that is contradictory to that, we've seen quite often sometimes authors face a lot of backlash.
Yeah.
So yes, what I try to do again is to demarcate. She said these things, she's given personal antidotes, but I'm more interested in her praxis, her theory. Yes, it's informed by all of these different factors. What is the theory of, because this is a non-fiction book, what's the theory of this black and female title? What is underneath these headings and subjects? If it's in fiction, again, sure, I could read a book by an author who, for example, recently I read a book called Hours by an author called Philip B. Williams.
Okay.
And he went to the University of St. Louis in the United States, in Missouri, the state of Missouri. He set his story in Missouri. So when I read his biography, I could see that, okay, because he went to university there, that's why
space. Yeah.
he drew a lot from the archive and St. Louis history. That's okay. But beyond that, I don't try to read too much into what he felt about the city, etc. That's a bit, I feel sometimes as readers, yes, we want to feel connected to our authors, but let's just analyze. I'm an advocate for looking at the work rather than the artist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's fair. So I think an important part of you, I think your passion for books and reading, and obviously that led you to co-found the Harari Book Club, is just something to sort of touch on as well, because I know that you're making strides, improving, and I'm sure that there's a vision that you're working towards. So I understand that this year you've made a partnership with publisher.
Yes, so we're always thinking about the ways that our organization can grow, and that is quite difficult given the current economic situation that we have in Zimbabwe, because books are a luxury, right? So how do we stress the importance of reading, literacy, and also cultural preservation,
Preservation,
thank you, within books as a tool,
Yeah.
but also when people perhaps can't afford, or the budget is shrinking, it now becomes quite a luxury.
Yeah.
So partnering with international publishers such as Macmillan South Africa, Jacana Media South Africa, and Cassava Republic, which is based in Nigeria and also the UK, that is crucial, because those relationships allow us to not only be more international as in our view in terms of the books that we read. Of course, we have a bias towards the Pan-African niche.
Yeah.
So we're Zimbabwean, right? We're Southern African, we're English speakers too.
Yeah.
So having these partnerships not only opens our own eyes to the different books that are out there.
Yeah.
From linguistic backgrounds. So this month we're reading a book from the Ivory Coast that was translated from French into English. And then the practical side, because yes, I'm a book lover, but now that I run this organization, I have to put on my corporate hat, my thinking cap.
Okay.
And I have to look at how my organization can be sustainable. How can we cut down on costs? And partnering with these publishers and having a close relationship with that, it allows us to do very boring business things like negotiating better prices.
Yeah.
I can then work out the logistics. And then so that once we bring books and other products into Zimbabwe, we want to introduce them to the local market, it allows us to have a book. So a book that perhaps would have been $21, now it's $16.
Yeah.
That's much better. That's more accessible for a wider audience. And then with that, bring it home again. We're very proud to announce that from February, we've partnered with the Friendship Bench. So the Friendship Bench has opened, just recently, a community center in Mount Pleasant. And that's going to be a place where there's physiotherapy, counseling, there's a cafe, there's art therapy, and it's open to the public. And we're helping them to build a community library. And we hope that it's going to make books more accessible to a wider audience, because there's been a shrinking of so-called third places in Zimbabwe. So a third place is a place that's not your work or not your home.
Yeah.
So it could be gyms, cafes, theaters, and also libraries.
It's true.
So we need to emphasize the importance of building communities. And when we're in urban areas such as Harare, that's difficult. It can be quite alienating. You feel overwhelmed by all the traffic and all these things. But it then also ties into the work that the Friendship Bench does, because they're a mental health space. So how can I build community? How can I be relaxed? How can I have somewhere to go where I'm not worried about all of these other things happening in life? And books, of course, for me, with my bias, books, I think, are the best way to relax and unwind and discover the world.
Yeah. That's the perfect note to end on. I think that's beautiful vision, beautiful mission. I can't wait to stop by and see and experience it as well.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you so much, Tonderai, for your time.
I look forward to seeing whatever else you're doing and how things progress, and
Yes, we're definitely
chatting about books.
Yeah, I'm always open to chat about that, and looking forward to you coming through and seeing the library, perhaps lending a book.
Lovely. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tonderai.
We've just had a great conversation between myself and Tondi on the book Black and Female by award-winning writer, author, and playwright Tsitsi Dangarembga. It was wonderful to unpack all the different themes, and I'm sure you've taken away so much from the episode, just like I did in conversation with Tondi. A big thanks to Akello Digital Library for being our sponsor for this season, and I look forward to the next conversation with you, our readers. See you next time.